Hello, good afternoon. European support for the International Criminal Court has become more pronounced following the recent issuing of arrest warrants for Israeli leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant in connection with war crimes during the war on Gaza. This move has intensified tensions within the international community, particularly between the EU and the US. While European nations are legally bound to uphold ICC decisions, the US is strongly opposed to the warrants, citing jurisdictional concerns. This divergence challenges EU foreign policy, testing the bloc's commitment to international justice amid political and diplomatic pressures, especially from its key ally, the United States. Welcome to In Depth. The Jerusalem Post has raised concerns that the ICC's arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the former Defense Minister Gallant could have lasting effects, potentially remaining unresolved for life. Israeli scholar Yuval Shani noted that while some view the ICC's actions as a necessary check on Israel, others worry it could hinder counter-terrorism efforts, especially given Israel's alliance with the US. Shani also discussed the ICC's handling of the complementary principle, which requires national courts to act before the ICC can intervene. He criticized the prosecutor for not affording Israel the opportunity to invoke complementary, suggesting this could prolong legal proceedings in The Hague. According to the Washington Examiner, the International Criminal Court is facing challenges in enforcing its arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. It reports that the warrants accuse Netanyahu and Gallant of war crimes related to the use of starvation in Israel's war on Gaza. However, several member states have expressed reluctance to enforce the ICC's directives. Italy, for example, stated that Netanyahu could not be arrested while serving as Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the European Union insists on enforcing the warrants, emphasizing that member states are obligated to comply. Some countries, such as Ireland, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, have shown willingness to act, while others, including France and Germany, have expressed reservations, citing their unique relationships with Israel. Before we continue, let's watch a report on how the political landscape has shifted as Europe and the US respond to the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. European nations showed varied support, while the US rejects the ICC jurisdiction, highlighting a deepening rift over international law, sovereignty, and accountability in global justice.
The political landscape has undergone a significant shift as Europe and the United States respond differently to the International Criminal Court's ICC arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. European nations, including the UK, have shown mixed reactions, with some signaling a willingness to cooperate with the ICC, in stark contrast to the US, which rejects its jurisdiction over non-member states such as Israel. This divergence reflects deeper philosophical differences. Europe has historically emphasized the importance of international law, while the US remains wary of what it perceives as judicial overreach. Under its principle of complementarity, the ICC intervenes only when national courts are unable or unwilling to act. However, the US opposes this framework, citing concerns about sovereignty and the potential for its citizens to face prosecution. The implications of this divide are far-reaching. Transatlantic relations may face new strains as European allies push for accountability in cases of war crime, while the US continues to shield Israel. Domestically, this situation could influence political debates in the US, particularly regarding its support for Israel amid increasing scrutiny of its military actions. In Israel, the government's handling of the situation may deepen domestic divisions and challenge Prime Minister Netanyahu's administration as it confronts both international criticism and internal pressures. As these developments unfold, the differing responses from Europe and the US underscore a broader struggle over the role of accountability in international law. This ongoing debate raises critical questions about the future of global alliances and the evolution of justice systems worldwide.
And now we are joined by Ambassador Patrick Theros, a former US diplomat from Washington, D.C., and also Dr. Majid Boudin, a professor of international law, joining us from Paris. Thank you both for joining me. Now, Ambassador, I will start with you. What is the US stance on the ICC?
The U.S. stance on the ICC is fairly simple. They've attacked the ICC decision on two grounds. The legal ground that the United States is not a party, that Israel is not a party to the treaty, to the legal obligations to the ICC, and secondly, that the ICC did not allow time or opportunity for the Israeli courts to take up the issue, and also a rather strong message from the White House accusing the ICC of equating Hamas with the Israeli state, and in effect saying that what Hamas has done is worse than what Israel has done. It is the political position that is the stronger. And I fear that if we ended up comes into our extreme pro-Israeli members of the Congress and the Senate to try and take action against the ICC, like forbidding its members from traveling to the United States or sanctioning its economies. So this is a fairly strong threat and to the reputation of the ICC that is coming out of Washington.
And Dr. Boudin, do you believe that the ICC's arrest warrants do equate with Hamas?
If you're asking me personally, I would say no. No, they don't. Originally, the ICC had recommended 2 Israelis and 3 members of Hamas. Gallant and Gallant and Netanyahu, and 3 members of Hamas, which unfortunately for the ICC, all 3 have been killed in military actions by the Israelis. So 5 requests for a warrant went forward, 3 to Hamas, 2 to Israel. On a personal basis, I think I find 45,000 dead Palestinians to be somewhat more equal than 1,100 dead Israelis. They're all sad, but the Israeli action continues. But that's a personal opinion.
Okay, well, let me just bring Dr. Boudin in there. What is your view on how the ICC's arrest warrants are viewed by the US and the EU?
Well, first of all, the U.S. is not party to the ICC, the International Criminal Court Convention treaty, and therefore the U.S. has no obligation toward the ICC. But having no obligations toward a treaty or toward a court doesn't mean that it can allow any country in the world to prevent or to make obstructions or to the normal dealing with that court. So so there is another obligation under international law, and here we are under international customary law to let the law be enforced, to let the international jurisdiction, which has legal existence, to carry out their duties. And it will be the honor of the United States to let the ICC do what they are doing, providing that they do it in the right way. And there is a lot of ways there are a lot of means to correct what the US is believing it's not made correctly. Therefore, we have this distinction to make. Now, regarding what are they equating? No, they are just doing their legal job, which is to apply applicable law to the facts. And when you apply applicable law to the facts are there is a distinction. First of all, there is a distinction between what Hamas has done and what the army has done, the Israeli army. A fact, we have a killing of civilians on the 7th of October, and this was qualified as he is right to make prosecution against these people, against these three Palestinian Hamas leaders. And on the other side, when you see 45,000 killed, innocent people, there is ground to prosecute the Israeli. Therefore, it's not a matter of equation, it's a matter of just applying law to facts. It's a matter of make a equation between the facts. Is baseless. Why? Because a political motivation cannot be taken into consideration in legal considerations and then legal grounds. The existence of Israel is a question here. Israel had the right to exist. The no question here. The of Israel is not in question here, and the world is standing with Israel to defend its security. But this does mean that Israel, to achieve these goals, they must use proportionate means, and 45 people is proportionate. Therefore, the political motivation cannot be taken into consideration. We have to let justice to be seen to be made in the world. Just when it's made, it must be seen in the world. And here we are facing a very huge danger, which is the world to see that there is killings of mass killings be prosecuted, or which is prevented to be prosecuted, and there is the faith, the trust will be disrupted, and the free world will be losing, and the humanity will be losing here. And this is why we have to be careful about that, and to let ICC do its job. And if there is something that is challenged, Israel must go before and Netanyahu and Gallant, and also Dave, they must go to this court and file their recourses, and the rights will have to be protected as the rights of defense must be protected, and they must be treated according to the law.
Okay, and Ambassador Theros, do you think that that the United States is going to put pressure on the EU. The EU is signed up to the ICC, unlike the United States. But do you think he's going to put pressure on the EU?
Particularly with the Trump administration coming in, I think certainly it's possible. But it would be a mistake on their part, because it would be trying to both sides, the EU and the United States, face a far larger crisis in the Ukraine. And secondly, because the EU is an establishment that would turn to its courts and provoke an even greater challenge to the United States, is if the European courts decide valid. So this would be an unnecessary and how can I say, not well thought out process. Thirdly, I am absolutely convinced that neither Mr. Gallant or Mr. Netanyahu will try and test the EU resolve by traveling to an EU country in the foreseeable future. So we're talking about American pressure being applied only for some reasons, and that would be not very smart at this time.
You don't think they're going to test that particular war?
I think it would be a monumental mistake.
Yeah. And Dr. Boudin, what about the EU trade policies with Israel? Could the ICC affect those? And also France, which is where you are right now and where you reside, seems to have a shifting position when it comes to these arrest warrants. Can you give us more information about that?
Well, it's not it's an interpretation. It's a shifting position. It's just a diplomatic interpretation for a while. France is playing a major part in the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and the Hezbollah military, etc. But for that, there is in these negotiations, there is an expression, there is a kind of promise or something like that to say that if we interpret a Rome Convention, Israel has immunity because it's not part of the convention. But I don't think it will go far. It's just a political proclamation, because if the case will become real, if Netanyahu Gallant will touch ground in France, for instance, and any French authorities will obey to the decision of the international an arrest warrant or an order to the obliged executive, whether the French president, the French prime minister, or the French authorities in general, to take measures to do these to comply with the arrest warrant. So human rights or the European Court of Justice, and therefore it's obvious that these will to the convention, to the Rome Convention, and therefore it's true that in fact Netanyahu and Gallant will not come to France or not come to Europe in general. And this has an effect, because the effect is that the freedom of these two leaders are now in practical terms, and it has an effect. It will have an effect also on Israel as such, because the things, and this is why it's very interesting to see Israel appealing this. We'll see what will get out.
I just want to bring the ambassador back in just for a moment. Do you think, Ambassador, that public opinion has any role to play in in governmental responses when it comes to these ICC decisions in Europe and also in the United States?
I can speak for the United States and can say that this is entirely a matter of public opinion, how it plays out in politics. There are some groups in the United States that have, how can I say, a basic support for Israel of the Jewish community, the evangelical Christians. There are people who are absolutely opposed to what Israel is doing. I would hate to be a pro-Israeli politician in Michigan at the moment, given its large Arab population. So I would say that a significant portion of the American population supports Israel for whatever reason, and therefore politicians believe it is necessary to fight or at least to refuse to recognize the ICC case. In Europe, I'm less certain. I think the Europeans, because they are signatories to the convention, are far more likely to leave this up to the courts rather than make this a political issue. And as I said earlier, it would be an act of monumental stupidity for either Mr. Gallant to try to test this by going to a European country.
Boudin, might the ICC's arrest warrants influence between the EU, France particularly, and Israel?
Of course. I mean, this is straightforward. There is a straightforward relation between the citizen and the sales of arms. Why? Because these massive crimes has been made by weapons, and so the country who has given these weapons or has sold these weapons to Israel, and these weapons were used by the army under the commandment of Netanyahu and Gallant. These countries, they could be taken liable, and we have seen decisions from Dutch courts, Irish courts, Canadian courts.
Okay, we definitely got to the point of the answer there, Dr. Boudin. Thank you very much. That was Ambassador Patrick Theros, a former US diplomat from Washington, and also Dr. Majid Boudin, a professor of international law, joining us from Paris. Thank you both for joining me on the program. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.